Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Jack Kirrane Ice Rink Design Review Committee meeting. It's our second such meeting. It is Thursday, July 30th. And our first agenda item is approval of the minutes from the meeting of June 22nd, 2026. So I would like to go ahead and move that we approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank
Okay.
you.
Wait, please call your name. Who seconded?
Jason Bowers,
Okay,
seconded.
thank
Right.
you.
So Jason seconds. Clara, your vote.
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Arisa,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Debbie,
Yes.
Wadner,
Yes.
Robert. All right, we'll go back to you, Robert. Mary,
Yes.
Isabel,
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes.
All right, Robert, one more chance. Can you unmute yourself? Maybe you're on mute. All right, I vote yes as well. And with that, we will now move on to item 1B, project history. Who will take this?
I'll jump in here.
All right, go right ahead.
Okay, great. Evening, everyone. So I'm going to share my screen and we're just going to pull up our presentation here. So project history, just a quick refresher on the previous meeting that we had, just a quick recap of where we left off last time. We have our project goals that we went through last time, fossil-free fuel mechanical systems, managing change, looking at the historic gardens, which was the focus of our last meeting, rink improvements, site improvements. These are things we're going to be looking at in future meetings, which we'll get to, as well as seasonal year-round programming. Today, we're going to focus mostly on warming hut and support building improvements, as well as site accessibility, the paths up to and around those buildings. That's going to be our focus of the meeting today. But last meeting was a great chance to kind of go over all of this and get everyone's thoughts, and feelings about what's important here, and kind of lay the groundwork for us to build off of for this meeting and the future ones. So a quick update to our design schedule here. We've gone ahead and after the last meeting added a couple more. We initially just had 3 meetings. Now we're proposing 5 design meetings for part of this process. So as I just mentioned before, today we're going to look at the conceptual layout of the support buildings, the warming hut and the Zamboni shed, as well as the accessibility paths around them and up to the site. The next meeting is going to look more in depth at specifically the ice rink and the landscape around the ice rink. The 4th meeting is going to combine meetings 2 and 3. So we're going to have one concept plan that combines architecture and landscape. And then the 5th meeting is going to be the final, ideally approval of that plan along with the project estimate. So the 3rd meeting is scheduled for, our next one is scheduled for September 16th. The 4th meeting, November 2nd, and the 5th meeting, we don't have a date selected for yet, but we should have one soon. And that's the duration of this conceptual design process here. Following this, we would go to, we would need town approval to proceed for the full design of this project. So that's the focus here. And we've included this slide as well, just to add a little bit more information about the forthcoming meetings. So today we have, like I mentioned, the support buildings and accessibility that we're going to be looking at. And the goals for today are to kind of hone in on what the group sees as an appropriate architectural style for the work that we're doing here on the site, to get approval on an entry sequence. When we met in the last meeting, we looked at 2 separate ideas about entering the building and the site, one from the side of the existing warming hut building and one from the center. So we're going to look for direction, and hopefully, approval on one versus the other there, as well as the idea of outdoor gathering spaces in and around these 2 support buildings. So that's the goals of our meeting today. And then we have, again, the agenda and goals of the forthcoming meetings. We want to go ahead and take a look at that at a later time. So this information is here for you now. As a refresher, this is our area that we're looking at here. The limit of work is everything within the red line. And today specifically, we're looking at the warming hut and the mechanical shed, the two buildings in pink, and the landscape surrounding them, including the path up from what's off screen now, but the larger parking area. That's just down bottom of the page at the bottom of the hill. So that's the focus of our call today. A recap of the last meeting, what we heard from everybody, key points. We got unanimous approval of our proposed guiding design principles for working within the historic landscape, which was great. We were really happy about that, to have this kind of this baseline of design ideas that we're working from going forward. A functional ice rink is going to be crucial for everybody, all years of groups of skaters and hockey alike. Again, that's going to be the focus of next meeting. We're not looking at the rink specifically this meeting, but we are actively working on it with our ice consultant to get more details so that we can have a robust conversation in our next meeting. One other thing we heard about the current rink is that people enjoy, and it's important, and it's in the town mandate, that we keep the rink open air. So the idea of things overhead at the rink is something that we should avoid. We heard that it's important that accessible parking spaces remain at the top of the hill. We want to keep the site as easily accessible to everybody as we can. So that was an important piece of feedback we got last time that we've incorporated into this round of design. Improved access to all sides of the rink would be very beneficial. And that seemed like something that everybody was supportive of during the last call, as well as improved connections between the facilities here, the rink, and the surrounding landscape in the park. Another piece of feedback we heard was that current public space in the warming hut and around the warming hut is not big enough. There's not enough space for the amount of people during public skate or other functions to comfortably fit everybody in that building and in the landscape around the rink. Additionally, year-round programming is important, and it's something that we're going to study further, again, at a later date. There seemed to be consensus during the last meeting that the support buildings, the warming hut and the Zamboni shed, as well as the storage sheds, should be consolidated and improved. And to that end, that specifically within the warming hut, that the locker rooms in their current state are not functional, that they need privacy, and they should really be separate from the gathering hall. They shouldn't be a space that people are walking in and out of, because that's going to be an important piece of this. So that was some of the key takeaways from the last call that we looked at going into our design here. And again, just a quick recap of the guiding design principles that we looked at. Honoring the preservation restriction. We have preserve, restore, and reconstruct the historic frame of the garden, which is this area shown in pink. Again, we're not going to be looking at that so much today, as we are going to be looking at the area in blue, defining a rehabilitation zone for new construction that improves the skating experience and respects the historic context of the site. So that's what we're looking at today in relation to the buildings and the landscape around them. And the final point, prescribing solutions that meet universal accessibility requirements throughout the site and minimize the impact on the historic design landscape. So that's a quick recap of what we talked about last time. And before we jump into the design, I want to just quickly take us through existing conditions. I know all our DRC members have been out to the site at some point previously, but it's been a little while now. So just a quick refresh on what we're looking at as kind of critical pieces of this redesign. So starting on the site level, thinking about access, there's no true accessible path from the main parking lot up to the site, which is a big problem. We have this driveway too steep to be accessible, and then we have a staircase running up, so there's no accessible path up to the building. If you're not parked up in one of the accessible spots at the building, there's no other way to get there. If you need that accessible path. The existing Zamboni shed, which you can see coming up the drive and the staircase, is in disrepair and really needs to be replaced. The equipment and it's not functioning. So that's something that we're looking at how to reconstruct that. The current parking lot at the top, although it looks flat, our design team, our landscape team has been looking at it, and it really does have some issues in terms of ADA even up there as is. The layout of the parking spots and just that area itself, although it's better than the driveway up, is still not quite up to current standards when it comes to accessibility. And the last photo on this slide, looking at the historic center entrance to the building with these historic columns that came from the garden that we are keeping and reusing in all of our schemes. That was an important piece of feedback we heard last meeting that people liked the idea of. Continuing looking at the site, the existing Rink entrance is not super well defined. It's kind of to the side of the building. It's around the parking spaces. It's a little bit blocked off. And not super welcoming. You come in looking at this, block wall before you turn in. The accessibility right now needs to be improved getting up to the building. You have this kind of winding ramp network that becomes a little bit of it's a little serpentine and can become a pinch point getting in and out of the building. Again, just looking at the Zamboni shed, its proximity to the historic wall, something that, we'd like to kind of minimize the impact it's having here and, at the same time, find a way to allow people to access all sides of the rink around the Zamboni shed, ideally if we can. And then just a reminder of the warming hut, how it looks now from the ice with that, again, row of columns underneath that eave of the building, which again, we're looking at keeping and all the schemes that we're going to show you today. As a reference to the old loggia, the old pergola that used to exist at the south end of this garden. A few more site photos. One just pointing out the current vehicle access route is partially blocked by a storage shed here. So we're looking to consolidate that and make a more clear vehicle access route around the backside, but keeping it in the same location around the backside of the building. Again, temporary sheds that are really just cluttering the site and are in the historic landscape that we want to remove and incorporate into our new design. One piece of feedback we heard was, the seating, this is where people are sitting now, is along the edge of the warming hut in these benches. But these and the hockey stick bins, these are things that have utility for people that use this rink. So these are things that we want to think about, reincorporating in an intentional way when we're coming into a new design. And the last photo here is the current part of the current gathering space, which is just a little bit too small for the size of the rink. So no matter the program, what's going on out there, it's not quite a big enough or comfortable enough area for people to sit down right now. And that's at the bottom right here next to that storage shed that we're looking at on the top left. We have some plans drawn of the existing conditions that we were working off of. Just as a reference point, these were, I don't think we need to look at this too much, but just to show you where the buildings are now. When we look at future plans, we're going to have the footprint of these buildings as a dashed red line. So you can kind of tell relative to what's existing, where we're proposing things go. And then again, as a reference here, we have the existing plan with existing room sizes here so that we can have a more tangible understanding of what we're proposing in terms of increasing space or moving space, how we're proposing changes take place here, what we think makes sense. And then the same thing for the Zamboni shed. One last look at existing conditions, looking at the interior of the building before we jump into the designs. Just a quick look at what we have now for the skate and equipment rental area, which we've heard is a little bit small for the function of how much space they actually need here. The gathering space as well, again, it gets crowded during public skate when everybody's inside is what we've heard, and there isn't really a ton of really useful bench seating or storage in here. people kind of overflow from here into the locker rooms, the changing areas, which again doesn't really give them a sense of privacy or function as changing areas, which is something we want to look to address. And then the existing concessions area, which is something we've heard is not necessarily something that needs to get substantially bigger, but is something that gets used, and having the indoor-outdoor presence of this is nice and something that we've aimed to keep in our schemes. So these are parts of the interior that we've looked at addressing. And then from here, we're going to jump into our design concepts, starting with accessibility. So I will pass it over to Glenn Valentine from Stimson, who can take you guys through the beginning of our first design idea. Go ahead, Glenn.
Thanks, Jeff. You can see here as Jeff mentioned, this is our side entry scheme. The two alternatives we're going to be showing are one which shows left-hand side or west side of the warming hut entry, and a central entry for the warming hut. Here you can see that long walkway coming up from the parking lot on the left-hand side. It's going to be a gentle walk, about 2.9% along the length of most of it at some of the steepest points. So it'll feel just slightly inclined from the parking area all the way up to the arrival area on the left-hand side for the new entry on the left-hand side. Once you get there, there are 3 steps to go up to take you directly into the existing kind of condition that you have now of on the left-hand side as you go in, and then a ticket window on the right. The accessible route from that arrival point is to go around the accessible parking on a gentle walkway, a sloped walkway, up and around to navigate those 3 steps, and then gets you to the same point where you can get your ticket and enter. You can see that the 2 accessible parking spaces are integrated into this scheme, so they feel like a coherent part of the arrival area. We have the 2 spaces with an aisle between them to serve the 2 spaces. And this scheme also preserves a large amount of green space in the front next to the arrival areas and next to the walkway to put some trees in and put some planting in to make this space feel more like an outdoor room that you might want to use, and much more welcoming, and kind of a space where you could have events or extend events happening in the warming hut out into this area. You'll see an area to the right for a food truck, which would come up and park there. And you'll notice that you'll see in some other sketches and perspectives the trellis along the left-hand side, which is going to be a very strong signal, an indicator of where the arrival is, a great wayfinding device, as well as a way to connect you visually down to the parking and that arrival walk. So you'll see that even from the parking lot, from the adjoining access road, welcoming you and inviting you up so you can see where you're going right when you begin the journey of arrival. Drop-off would be handled in this striped area right next to the 2 accessible parking spaces. Someone could pull up in there, drop someone off. They'd have to do a 3-point turn and then get out and drive back down the way they came in. This scheme also preserves, and the other one will as well, the existing service access route on the northeast side of the warming hut, which will still be gated, what will allow access for vehicles around to maintain the rink and service the rink. And, oh, I didn't mention there's stairs, but there is a stair up the hillside at the bottom of the existing drive, which is a shortcut for people who are walking on that arrival drive, which could take you right to that entry walk to the main entry. If you're not in the parking area, if you're just walking from below or arriving for another part of the park to the warming hut and skating rink.
Okay. And
That's it for this slide,
from
Jeff.
here, we can jump to Marianne, who's going to take us through the first design concept from the architecture side.
Hi, everyone. We're excited to get your feedback. So I think the scheme has gotten a lot better based on feedback we got from you last time. So Glenn brought up that the loggia creates a kind of defining or identity from the parking that's down below. And that was somebody on this this Zoom call last time who brought that up. And we just really thought it was a great idea to have something that kind of signifies that there's something wonderful up there. And very different than what you have now with that pretty ugly Zamboni hut right there. So with the entry, we're using the old columns, the 4 old columns at the front, and then we would move to a wood column, kind of a traditional wood column that would create the loggia, and it creates a space that's in between the warming hut and the Zamboni shed that we're thinking could be a really wonderful south-facing space that overlooks the skating area. We're thinking it could have a fire pit that people could gather around and stay warm. And in that sense, it would expand the indoor gathering space. It could have places to sit. We're sizing the Zamboni shed to be exactly what our ice consultant tells us we need. And we'll have an ice drop off behind it. And we've got a stair down because we want to keep all that storage in the red outline, the red dotted outline. That is the footprint of what you've got now for the utility room. So it would be utilities and storage down there. And we have found out that utilities are going to be much smaller than what you have now too. And then the concept is you come around through the loggia and you have the office, you get your tickets and there's a gate, and then you can come into the gathering space. The gathering space has a lot of benches, a lot more than what you have now, that start to create spaces between them for people to have spontaneous encounter and talk to each other, more social. And then we've added benches along the outside. So you've got benches on the inside, benches on the outside, and then the whole new kind of outdoor gathering space. There's a row of toilets that are all single use. And then we've got changing rooms that have their own doors to the outside, which are private. And the cafe has a window to the gathering space and to the outside to service outside. The office has storage off of it, and it also multi-purpose office where you get your ticket, but it's also where the skate rentals are, and you can see those little lines near the word integrate. That's where the skates would be. And the square footage has really gotten so much better. So you had 535 square feet in your existing building for the gathering space, and we have gotten, in this scheme, 705 square feet. So it's not only do you get the outdoor gathering space with the fire pit, you also get a much bigger indoor gathering space. The cafe, which was 75 square feet, is now 115. The changing rooms were 225, and they're staying that way. But in the ones you've got now, the hallway runs through it. So this will feel like a much bigger room and much better placement of benches and hooks and things for people to store their stuff. We are planning on reusing the historic columns, which we love, on the front and on the back. And we have renderings for both of those that we're going to show you. And we're really excited to get feedback from you on all of this. Okay. The next slide. So we're the loggia and the space between the warming hut and the Zamboni shed could be a really wonderful space. Not only in the winter, are you getting the southern sun coming in this way, so it would kind of extend your outdoor season where it's comfortable. But in the summer, we could hang, when you see them in the dash lines, we could hang like those sails you see over restaurants sometimes that create shade, so that we're getting also a shady area for possible summertime use. You could go to the next slide. So here you can see the historic columns, the loggia, the space between the Zamboni hut and the warming hut, and the windows on the front of the warming hut are lining up with that gathering space, which is kind of almost like a view through. It's a void through the building. So when you come up, you would see into the gathering space and see through it to the ice. We're keeping the idea of the gable roof in this scheme and similar pitch to what you have now, and it would be a metal roof like what you have now. And then you can see the hill slopes down, so where the loggia is and below the Zamboni hut, the hill slopes down, and so you're getting a full basement. It's really almost like a walkout basement that's right in on the footprint of the existing utility room, and it would be for storage and utilities. Probably have a door to the outside. And then the next scheme. Oh, here it is from the back. We wanted to test it. You know, what's your view when you're recreationally skating from the ice? How does it feel? You can see the columns layered in front of the building. They would be attached to the roof. We're just, didn't finish the rendering perfectly, but they're not floating in front. They would be attached the way they are now. The roof overhangs and they come up to the edge of the roof. The view through the building, the Zamboni garage door, and the space between, which would be a wonderful extension of the gathering space and have that southern light. And I think if we back up to the plan, Jeff, I just want to say something about why. So the Zamboni shed, we looked at putting the Zamboni shed on the northeast corner, and we did a cost benefit of that, which was something that we had brought up, that had been brought up by the community in our last call. And the Zamboni can, you know, because it crosses the sidewalk to get onto, or the plaza to get onto the skating surface, it's possibly, you know, dangerous. So it's much better in this, but so there were two reasons that we kept it in this location. It's much better in this location because the kiddie rink is up on the right side of the page. And so people might be going from the kiddie rink, you know, when the Zamboni's out on the ice, from the kiddie rink to the fire pit to the gathering space. And so that's kind of a path, a desire line of foot, you know, a pedestrian path over there in the north, basically like northeast corner of the site. And so that felt like a bad idea to move the Zamboni. So we don't want it to be crossing people's paths. And then the other reason was it would be very, very expensive to move all that. We have all the utility lines coming in, basically like right below that outdoor seating, that outdoor couch. So we decided to keep the Zamboni here for safety and for cost reasons. Plus, it gets you a plaza that's south facing, which would be amazing in the winter in New England. Okay, and then the next one. So somebody on the call last time, one of the community members said, you know, why aren't you guys testing something that's a little bit more contemporary? And so we tried a butterfly roof that it's the same principles. You see through at the entry, there's the loggia, there's the south facing plaza, the building holds that space between the Zamboni hut and the warming hut. And then the Zamboni hut has a shed roof and it's very lyrical. It feels kind of landscapey. We're happy with this scheme too. We're happy with both. We also are trying a trellis over the outdoor seating area in this scheme, which is mix and match. It could go with either one so that nobody has to put up sails, you know, in the summer. It's just always kind of a place that could be a little, you know, we'd orient the slats of the trellis to let in the winter sun, but keep out the summer sun. So it would be kind of multi-purpose for winter and summer. And then We have this view from behind as well. Just to look at how, how does that feel when you're skating? Does it feel right? Does it feel like it's, fits this, the site? These are the things we want to hear from you, weighing the kind of stylistic consequences. What are these associations? And then next slide. Glenn, would you like to take this?
Yes, thanks, Marianne. This sketch just gives you a sense of the character of the new warming hut and arrival area and how much that could be transformed or will be transformed with how we're envisioning this space evolving. You can see the pathway sloping up from the left. We kind of imagine that as a walkway through an orchard. Maybe you could have meadow grasses on the downhill side and kind of ground cover or garden-esque kind of planting on the uphill side of that. So it really feels like that walkway would be a wonderful experience of arriving and going through the landscape to get to the main entrance. You can see here the loggia or trellis that Marianne was describing. It may have a green roof on it or may not. We're also envisioning that larger trees at the top of the hill could provide some of that shade if this is used in the summer, but if they're deciduous, then they could be they would be open for the winter to allow that southern sun to come into that new space. You can also see how that those 3 steps work there and how the sloping walkway that goes around the space allows that access up to the main entry and incorporates the accessible parking spaces and drop off. And then you see those yellow trees representing, maybe those are shad or birch trees that just soften the front area. They're smaller scale and more vertical and make that whole outdoor space feel like a place that you might want to hang out or have an event. And you can see that cut out where we can imagine maybe a food truck coming up for an event to augment food service in the warming hut.
So we also, Glenn, are you going to speak to this? I think you are.
Yeah, I was going to speak to this one, Marianne. This is the accessible and site plan for the central entry scheme. And here, again, you have that long walkway coming up from the parking area at a very gentle pitch. This one, about 4%, takes you directly around the corner and to the center of the building. No steps at all in this one to the main entry, and takes you through to the center, to the central entry through the gathering space where you get your tickets and you get your skates. This one also has accessible parking integrated into the scheme. Down below, 2 spaces, and then a gentle 4.9% walkway up from there to wrap around and get you to the main entry. It has a drop-off area there. We imagine people could come off to that striped area at the bottom of the parking area to drop someone off, and then do a 3-point turn to get out and go back down. This one also maintains the access on the left side or west side of the warming hut, but we imagine that that would really just be for service, that would be gated and for utilities getting in and out, but it wouldn't be the main entry into the space. This one has a little bit larger area next to the Zamboni shed. We're investigating what it looks like when we put back that retaining wall there. Then we might create a little bit more space there. This one also keeps the same access route around on the north side of the Zamboni hut to provide service and vehicles to get around the building and get to the ice rink and service the facility.
And so the idea in this scheme is that we're centering the historic columns and the main and the door on the front exactly on axis with the center of the skating rink. And so that we're honoring the historic landscape, which was very axial with this move. And then if we go to the next slide, you can see how it works out in terms of the size. So at first, when we started looking at this, the room, obviously, because it's based on the same kind of columns and that it really wasn't any bigger than 535 square feet, which is what you need to make that room bigger, the gathering space. So what we did was we have a center door, center loggia, but then we expanded the room on the inside to the left, but you don't read that from the outside. But when you come in, it's a big room. It's 705 square feet with benches everywhere. The tickets are interior, so you're not standing outside to get your tickets. You're coming in the door and the tickets are right there on the left. The bench kind of directs you towards the ticket area. Skate rentals are same kind of concept where the rentals and the tickets are all coming out of the office space, which has storage off of it. There is a cafe that, in the existing building is 75 square feet. In this building is 115. The changing rooms are 225 square feet. So it's very comparable to the scheme you just looked at in terms of program and what we were able to fit in. We added another office that's overlooking the skating rink because we wanted to get a little bit more eyes on the ice, because just to make the two schemes parallel. And so that would be a small office. There's storage. And let's go to the next one. And then the idea, similar to the other scheme, of the space that's held between the two buildings with the Zamboni shed pulled back. So one of the slides that Jeff showed is when you're coming in the entrance right now and you're buying your tickets and you're, addressing the ticket window on the right, the Zamboni shed pulls all the way forward and blocks your view of the garden, of the old, the ruins really of the garden. In both of these schemes, because with modern Zambonis and with using our ice rink consultant, we were able to pull that Zamboni shed way back. And so you're going to get from the outdoor sitting space, and in the scheme that enters on the left, you'll get a view through of the garden. It'll be so much better, so much less blocked. Also from the gathering space, when you're looking out the window, you'll see diagonally across the sheet of ice to the garden structures. So we're also lining in both schemes the outdoor seating area with benches, as well as the fire pit and the seating area. Okay, let's go to the next one. And this is what the building could look like, which we're really happy with. The 4 historic columns, the view through, the big windows that give you a view through to the ice sheet, and that's the main entry. And then the space between the Zamboni hut and the warming hut, the south-facing plaza area that space becomes. If the community feels that the center entrance scheme is stronger, we could still add kind of a loggia around the seating area. Some of this stuff is mix and match, that then could also have the trellis or the sails. But you just wouldn't be entering on the side, you'd enter in the center. And then this is the view from the back. It's very elegant. The view through, the use of the historic columns. Go to the next one. Okay, Glenn.
And here's the character of this transformed landscape. Again, you have that entry walk from the parking area here, imagining a meadow flanking it on both sides. So it kind of be the sense of walking through this native meadow, and you could have flowering trees or almost feel like an orchard that you're walking through as you arrive. In this sketch, you get the sense of how this sloping walkway just takes you directly to the central entry with no stairs. It's just a nice smooth transition to that space. As Marianne mentioned, we might have the arbor in this one, but if we didn't, we might put more shade trees, deciduous shade trees up above around that outdoor space, which we think is going to be wonderful with a fire pit in the wintertime. Could be really wonderful in the summertime as well, with some shading up there and a view down below looking beyond to the rest of the park. It would also function similarly to be a wayfinding device and create a welcoming kind of vista from below to entice people to come up and know where they're going when they arrive at the bottom of the entry drive. When you get up to the front of the building, we're flanking that central entry with smaller, more vertical trees, again, maybe birches or shad or something like that to reinforce that central entry that Marianne's emphasizing in this scheme. The accessible parking is integrated down below with a little retaining wall and then a sloped walkway to get you from that parking up around to the entry in the center. And again, we envision drop off being along the bottom of that accessible parking where the ramp is, and then you could do a 3-point turn using that paved entry apron there to pull in and then back out and drive back down the main entry. This also maintains the access road around to the right.
Okay, and then more as a reference, just to come back to and for people to look at after the meeting, if they'd like to look in more detail, we have a comparison, square footage comparison of the existing scheme to both of the design concepts. Of note, the warming hut itself is not getting significantly bigger. It's 150, 200 square feet or so, which is mostly the expansion of that center gathering space. And everything else is more or less just being reallocated to kind of increase the size of the office and maintain storage, so that we're trying to maximize the space that gets the most use in the building. Zamboni shed, I think the important thing to note here, just so we're all reading this the same way, is that the mechanical space, as Marianne mentioned, gets a lot smaller. If we do a water or a hydraulic-based system, not an air-based cooling system, which is what our ice consultant's recommending, that is a 600 square foot room is what they need, which gives us a ton more access. The existing footprint of the Zamboni shed is 1,400 square feet. So if we're putting all of the mechanicals and storage underground, that's basically giving us an additional 800 square feet of storage, which we're not explicitly listing here, but between the old scheme and the new scheme. So just so you guys know, when you're understanding this, the mechanical space here, the 600 square feet, is actually located basement level underground. So that's here as a reference point. And then from here, I think we're going to jump into our public discussion and the design questions that we'd love your input on. So I think I pass it off here back to David, I believe it is. Is that correct? I'm happy to run through these if that's easier.
It is, that's correct. All right, so do we have anyone who would like to ask a question or make a comment who's on the committee? Go ahead, Mark. You gonna unmute yourself, Mark?
This is Laurie, just interrupting.
I'm
All,
sorry.
all public speakers, please state your name and your address clearly. Okay? If you would do that for me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Mark Cirillo, 3 Copley Street, Brookline, member of the planning board, representative on the committee. I really like the two schemes that you put together. It's very interesting because I always think of a mix and match thing with regard to design. And so I just wanted to make a few comments related to the building, if that was okay. The first thing I was thinking of is I like the loggia connector. I think I sort of suggested maybe something like that where you could make a connection between the two buildings and make it look more like a complex rather than 2 individual buildings. I like it because I like the idea that maybe in the corner of that space where if you could put that plan up again, I could suggest we might look at a tower in that corner. And when I say a tower in that corner, the one that's in the furthest corner out on the lower side, where you could walk up and maybe take a look at the garden at a higher elevation, any renovations that are happening to the garden, a look at the entire sort of open area of the rink and so forth. That might be something that you could think about as a as a feature. I know that like on at Putterham, at the golf course, there's a way to look at the greens in front of you by going up an open stair. I don't know if anyone has played in Putterham, but that is the kind of thing I'm envisioning, not really an enclosed thing, but maybe a stair up to a second level where you could actually look over the top of the buildings. The other thing I was going to suggest too is since we don't have the ability to use natural gas in the fire pit, I guess we would be using propane. But even so, you might want to consider sort of like a open campfire type situation where you could actually build a wood fire, as if it was a campfire. That might be that's just a suggestion, because it could also be used by people to roast marshmallows and do some other things with that situation if they were allowed. The volume of the modern roof line that you suggested as option number 2 strikes me as interesting, and it would be really great to have that higher volume over the gathering space. To have that higher volume that you see there. And then when you look at the other side, which is above the locker rooms and in the toilets, I don't know if you can capture any square footage up there that you might need for storage or for some other means. So I mean that to me is a good idea, and I'm just throwing it out. That's a good idea for capturing more FAR if that's what you wanted to do. I love the center entry coming in. If you combine that with the loggia, I think that in a tower that sort of pulls everything together, I would love to see something along those lines in terms of an architectural expression. And lastly, I think it was oh yeah, if we do work with the loggia wrapper that connects the Zamboni shed to the main building, you might think about not making it a flat roof, but making it slightly pitched. It just adds a little more interest to that scheme, to that look, and I think it would coordinate with the pitches on the other roofs, if you could consider that. Those are my comments, but I really like the layout of the second scheme with the center entrance combined with some of the other design features that you came up with, which is really good work. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mark, for your comments. Next, we have Arisa.
Thank you. Arisa Boyd, Preservation Commissioner, 271 Goddard Ave, and town meeting member, precinct 15, but I'm representing Preservation Commission. I agree. I think these are a very positive step forward. I have a few questions. So in the last meeting, I think I am the one who brought up a second story, but it appears that it's a clear story. And as the previous speaker said, that in my mind, it's a prime place for people to be able to view the skating from, maybe, give us a little more elbow room, some more bathrooms, or maybe that's where there's more storage and stuff. I like the central entrance. I think that that is much more in keeping with the historic feel. However, I wonder, since the office is right there along the path, if one might be able to have an outdoor window so that you don't have to block people as they're coming in with the seating. That, you know, you buy your ticket and then you come in. And again, if you had an upstairs space, then some of that storage office next to the cafe could also be that, you know, the skating, the rentals and such. It would give us a little more space, but I don't like the butterfly roof. I think that, never mind the fact that, you know, ice damming is the first thing that I think of when I think of a butterfly roof. It feels too modern for the space, and it, you know, especially with the columns, and they kind of, how do you make them integrate with a butterfly roof? So if we were simply to kind of have a clear story within, in a more historic look, but again, I like the loggia as well. My other question and another concern, I'm not 100% clear on what's going on with the historic walls with this and where they fall. And also the very large evergreen trees, and if there is a way to work with them instead of tearing them down, because they are, you know, oh, wonderful trees, and I don't think they're in bad health. So if we've looked at that, and again, and the accessibility part of it, it seems like, so right now there are a lot of parking spaces. A couple are allocated to accessibility, but we seem to be losing space. You know, we've got a 3-point turnaround, try to get a food truck in there, all of those sort of things. It seems to me that if it's a gentle slope, the food truck could be down at the bottom of the hill. And I'm not so convinced about the need for the green space in, you know, the smaller trees right in front, because they're going to detract from the columns. I think that's really part of the wonderful thing, and we could do something lower that brings people in, and maybe get a little more accessible seating there. So again, I love that you've made it in such a way that it's mix and match, and you've really maximized with the Zamboni and bringing outside space. But I also wanted to mention that I don't think it's been addressed yet, that as you go into up the walls around past the Zamboni shed and such, that there's a real opportunity to use the grass, the slope, to make seating along the edges as well. So for spectators. So if we don't do the second story, if we, you know, because that is going to be more costly, that's another way that we can add real viewing to whatever is going on in the rink. So thank you. It's very pleased with both, and look forward to hearing others.
All right, so that we don't hand off to the architect team too many questions all at once. Can we maybe have an initial response to two of Arisa's questions that I'm recalling at the moment? One pertains to tree layout and the other to the wall. If someone from the architect team could address those 2 points.
I can talk about the trees for sure. And of course, we don't like to take down trees, and we'll look harder at maybe trying to preserve them. But I think it's going to be extremely difficult in this case, Arisa, to make the accessible pathway achieve the grading that we need. We really need to raise the grade up in that area by 4 feet, I believe. And those trees won't be able to survive that. So and of course we would be replacing those trees with new trees. But Just so you know, those trees are not that old. They were planted in 2004. The largest of them is a 15-inch caliper tree. Most of them are 8-inch caliper trees. So they're not particularly large or old trees. And one of the things that the opportunity that we're seeing here with a smaller Zamboni shed is that we have this area to the south, which doesn't exist right now. And those large evergreen trees would really shade that all winter long and make that very cold and inhospitable. So that's why we're thinking of a new deciduous tree plan in there, but most importantly, to create the accessible route up the hillside, we're going to almost certainly have to take those trees down.
All right, and then I think Arisa also had a question about the wall. I'm not sure I fully captured what your question was, Arisa. If you could re-ask it, just about the wall.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just not clear on if there is, because the historic wall is it's hard to tell from what you're showing us where the historic wall is, and if there's anything going on with this design that impacts any of the historic architecture.
So we are keeping the, anything new we do away from the historic wall in these schemes, and we have more thinking to do about the historic structures, but we don't want to obviously build on top of them. So, but I'm interested in your point about there could be benches in the historic area. So I think we'll definitely look at that. And we'd love to hear if you have an opinion about how the wall should be treated.
All right, now we'll go to Clara.
Hi, Clara Bachelor, 29 Manchester Road. I'm a Park and Recreation Commissioner and Chair and representing the Park and Recreation Commission on this committee. Thanks for this very nice work. I would start off by saying I don't think we should use the butterfly scheme because it detracts from, you were talking about, you have the building and it responds to the axial, strong axis of the skating rink and the historic gardens. And I think the butterfly scheme really sort of negates that. So I'd like to see the structure kept fairly simple as you've shown it in the other two schemes. I like the center entrance, and I think the loggia that you were talking about in the first scheme you presented with the entrance on the side, I think that's such a strong image. It almost detracts, you know. I like keeping it. I like that there's a wonderful sitting area next to the Zamboni shed. And I think there's a way with you put an interesting fence around the sitting area. Whether we have a fire pit or not, that remains to be seen, but you could do something, a decorative fence, because you're gonna have a wall there or something. But I would say I like the simpler scheme that has the entrance centered. And I agree it would be nice to be able to get your tickets on the outside as well as going in. But I think it's really nice how you focus this presentation on the buildings, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Jason.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the work. I'll try to keep this brief. I have a number of comments, and I'll kind of go through, as my dad would say, staccato style. So first of all, I thought it was very clever the way that you integrated in the services and created the rooftop area on top of it, minimizing the massing in the building. I think that's great. I think I'm one of the lone people that I think slightly prefers the non-central entrance. I think that the exterior ticketing makes a lot of sense. I kept imagining in the central scheme, doors opening and people getting in the way of the gathering area in the middle. I think that the side entrance has a little more, for me at least, coherent plan. I like how the office is consolidated as just one sort of generous gathering space. And then on the other end, it's just sort of the services sort of in line. I like the trellis, but what I would say is, and I think you noted this, Marianne, it's used in the winter. It's also used at night. So make it something that's meaningful when you're cold and it's 10 degrees out and sunny, but also when it's like 4:30 at night and it's hockey practice and you're arriving and you want something welcoming as well. And maybe it's not sunlight, maybe there's some other thing that's integrating lighting or something like that. Couple of other items. You had mentioned the kiddie skating area, and I know we're not talking about the rink, but I want to make sure that we're not putting the cart before the horse. Because to me, when I see the sort of the seating area, I'm thinking, well, maybe the kiddie area should be over on the other side. I know that's a topic for another day, but I want to make sure we're being holistic, and I think it's important for us to sort of compartmentalize some of these elements to sort of focus the conversation, but I don't want to lose track of where these all sit together. I think there could be an opportunity as we continue to develop the rink to think of a balancing of the trellis on the other side, because there will be people sitting over there, especially if the kiddie is over there, and it might be a nice anchor there as well. I agree about the utility costs and not relocating the Zimborn to the other side. I think I'm sort of agnostic on the roofs. I think either way can be a beautiful building. I think that if there is an interest in the butterfly roof, I think the compelling argument is just that increased volume of light. I think adding a second floor will be a cost challenge, and I think and then you put a staircase in, you got to put an elevator in. I think I'd love more clarity as we go along about what actually is remaining of the building, because clearly there are trusses within the building that I think some folks appreciate, and obviously the butterfly roof they won't be appreciated anymore. But they could be integrated in with the gable version. I think then the last comment I would just have, and I forgot to say, I'm Jason Bowers, 20 White Place, Brookline, co-chair, building commissioner. I had to write a little note to say that to myself. The one last thing I wanted to say is, we've talked a couple times about the column, and the columns are part of the history of the site. And I'm curious, as we develop the landscape, what is the analogy to the column for the landscape? I know some of it's the hardscape that's around there and the steps, but as we're talking about the sort of the meadows and the birches, and I'm wondering, like, is that as part of that historic landscape, or is this sort of more a contemporary intervention in this larger one? So I'm curious, as we develop the conversation, how are we thinking about the history of the plants on this? I'm not saying it should be like Victorian and just all hydrangeas or something. I don't know, but it's something that speaks to the history in a contemporary or an innovative way, or a contemporary take on that, but with the landscape as well. And then I'll leave it there. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Mary.
Thank you so much. I'm encouraged at your efforts so far. I really think that concept one, the first drawing, is a coherent and welcoming entrance to the space. It's a beautiful hilltop space, and the side entrance compared to the center entrance was confusing for me, with the ticket booth right there and people gathering and crossroads of people, whereas you want to invite people into this wonderful world of the space. And for me, the first drawing really does that. And I'm glad you like the columns. I was someone who helped bring the columns from bumper stops around town in the first renovation of the warming hut, which we also call the pavilion. So I think that you've solved a lot of problems, and especially welcoming in, moving back the Zamboni is really fantastic. Opening up the space and letting people feel the space as much as they possibly can when they walk in the door or walk into the skating area. I could go on, but also Brookline has a new tree bylaw. And I think that has to be consulted in terms of even though it's public space and it's for private residences, I think we have to understand the climate effect of taking down fairly mature trees. And is there another way to let sunlight into that specific area in the winter? It could definitely shade in the summer if we go into summer planning. Maybe summer planning isn't the calling of this particular decision-making body, the skating rink group, but I think we need to think about sun and shade And that is one of the things about keeping older trees that are pretty well established. There's a lot of things I could say. There isn't a lot of time, but thank you very much. And I hope that we can consider the coherence of design number 1.
Thank you. Next, we have Isabel.
Hi, good evening. Isabel Tawby, 70 Upland Road. I am a DRC committee member and a representative of the public. I wanted to, again, just repeat some of the things that other people have said and reinforce them. I think you've done a terrific job here. Thank you very much for showing us these various different design concepts. At the moment, I'm leaning towards the central entry. I don't like the butterfly roof. I'm going to just quickly go through these things. One of my issues with the design number 1 is I'm wondering what it's going to look like with the four historic columns sort of on the front and then the wood columns around. And that's sort of one of my concerns about that. And I prefer the central entry where those columns are really featured as an historic item in the arrangement that you had there. I do like the ideas that have been raised about the outside and inside ticket areas being integrated into design concept number 2, perhaps in some way. I also liked Arisa's idea of the lower plantings in the front that would then again show off those columns that I've just been talking about. And I like the idea too of pursuing this notion of thinking more about the historic quality of the landscape and how we might, work that in here rather than putting in something that looks very kind of modern, contemporary. A couple of questions. I'm wondering how many stairs are in the lower staircase that you proposed? So you have the long path, but you mentioned a lower staircase as well as kind of an additional access route. And I'm wondering how many stairs are there just to get a sense of that. In terms of the relationship between, I think, the Zamboni hut and the outside gathering area, I'm just wondering what happens when the Zamboni goes out and what the effect is on people sitting in that gathering area, if any, and kind of how that's going to work. I know you've been already mentioning this issue of like pathways and what's crossing what and who is crossing what. And so I just like a little bit more explanation of, how that is separated out, the Zamboni moving onto the ice rink from the experience of the people that are sitting in that public gathering area that you have established. And then I also would advocate for more seating along the historic garden area, which we haven't talked about yet, but just kind of going forward and thinking about that, how we might use that for viewing as well. And that, conversation for another day. One point about the interior, and this is my last one. When I was going through it with Tim Davis, he mentioned that there was an ice sharpening area for sharpening ice skates. I'm just wondering how that might be integrated into your plan, because that has not been mentioned yet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Isabel had a couple of questions. Maybe Glenn could tackle them. The one about how many stairs for access.
Sure. It's about a 10-foot grade change up that slope, that set of stairs. So that would be 20 steps, and you'd go up 5 feet, and then you'd have a 5-foot landing, and then you'd go up 5 feet more.
Right. And then there was also the question about the relationship between Zamboni coming onto the ice and those who may be in the seating area.
I've been
If someone
thinking,
would like to address that.
I have been thinking about that. I think it's important. We're going to have some ball, we're going to have something that keeps people from running into the path of the Zamboni.
Yeah, it seems like you could put up temporary screens for that. We'll have to just make sure that that works with management of the Zamboni.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have Andrew.
Hey, good evening. Andrew Mullins, 68 Marshall Street. My role in the commission is I represent youth hockey with Brookline Youth Hockey, but really just evaluating from a general aspect of what functions best for the entire community here. I prefer option 1. I sort of echo what Jason Bauer pointed out as some of the concerns. I think option 2 just introduces too many choke points and sort of the disruption of flow just doesn't do it for me. I also wanted to flag the storage options that have been proposed. I think there's a bit more to do on this. The current design really doesn't have enough storage for operating some of the equipment that's left at the rink. So as you rent to the rink now, the first thing you see is two giant hockey nets. They sit outside all year round. And there's a bunch of other equipment that's needed in the facility. And just to really ensure the facility remains sort of clean and adequate, sort of organized, and just welcoming to the general public, all this stuff needs to be put out of sight. And it sort of, really needs to be integrated into sort of a better indoor storage area, I think. The community programs that are run there require varying sizes of nets and bumpers and, all sorts of things that are sort of dragged onto the ice. So those things need to be easily accessible from storage to ice and sort of out of the way of the public and sort of out of the way of just sitting out in the open for all year round like it does now. But that's all I have for now.
Thank you. So I want to echo some of what Andrew has said and also Arisa in a somewhat different context, which is it looks like there are some concerns about whether we can truly accommodate everything we want to see out of this interior space in a single floor. And then there was also the concern about the cost implications and the ADA implications of installing an elevator if you have second floor space. So my question is, what are our true confines with respect to a one floor footprint? So looking at the slide we have up right now, as you can see with the red dotted line, that's the existing building footprint. And then the blue obviously is what this design concept one would be. And it extends a little bit to our right. So there's some additional square footage there. How much more to the right in this image could we possibly go? And would that allow for additional storage space in a single story?
I don't think that we could go to the right because we need to get a car back there. That's our truck and car access. And that hill slopes down really steep right there. We could probably go a little bit to the left. We've been trying to preserve the trees as much as possible that are there. But it is a good point about storage. And I think going a little to the left, and then I've also been wondering during your people's comments, if the Zamboni shed just gets a little bit bigger so that there's still the view through and it's not blocking the historic walls, but it's providing a little more storage.
Would it be disruptive to have below grade storage?
We do have below grade storage, and I think we're getting about 800 square feet below grade. Where that stair that goes down underneath the Zamboni shed, we're going to keep that red outline as a basement for storage.
But I don't think that would work for the day-to-day operations of the hockey community, though, just because it's too challenging to get down there, though.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not for the nets and things like that. So it's something that we have to think about.
From an expense perspective, would it actually be cheaper then, even if we need to have an elevator and have a partial second floor, compared to having expanded below grade space beyond the 800 square feet?
We would have to have an elevator and 2 fire stairs, or 2 means of egress. So it would, I guess the question is, it'd be a great experience, what Arisa was saying. It would be amazing to have an overlook on the sheet of ice. The question is, can we afford it? And the room it would take for the 2 fire stairs and the elevator. We'll look at it.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Debbie.
Hi, thank you. I love that idea of the second floor. Debbie Hatziel-Leftheriadis, 24 Whitney Street, Park and Rec Commissioner and Precinct 15 Town Meeting Member, but I'm here as a butter. I want to thank you. This is so exciting to see this work. I like the side entrance. I love how open it is and how much space there is between the building and the outdoor space. When you go there, it can be so crowded, and at least there's now different areas for people to gather, people to walk, even in the walkway there. There seems to be, you know, just a free flowing space where you could step out and, you know, even in between. So I just love that. And I also agree the ticket window should be outside, just because that gathering space, you know, no matter how you do it, both designs, there's still a lot of there can be a lot of people in there. And with the side entrance and the outdoor space, I just, to me, it has more room to spread out. And with the ticket counter on the inside, it can get pretty bogged down, I think. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Are there any other members of the committee who have not spoken yet, who would like to have their opinions heard or questions answered? Please raise your virtual hand if you would like to be heard. All right, seeing none, I'll go back to you, Jason.
Don't want to take up too much oxygen. Just looping back to the issue of elevated views. I think for the next landscape workshop, I hope that they consider all the many wonderful places that you can sort of gain altitude, whether it's up the embankments or up at the end where it says that the garden is welled and then there's the stairs. And I'm hoping those are also seen as opportunities to sort of invite the visitors to sort of get other views of the landscape and the skating. So that's all. Thanks.
All right, Arisa.
Thank you. Because there's been so much interest in the first design, I wanted to come back to, and that's what we're looking at now. So my biggest concern about it, as Isabel somewhat articulated, is that we're going to lose a lot of the historic feel. So if people really want the side entrance, then I think we need some internal rearrangement, that the gathering space ought to be in the central axis, right? And that there should be a way perhaps to make the changing rooms vertical as opposed to horizontal, move some of the bathrooms, that sort of thing. And the historic columns really should be centered on the front of the building, even if you're not entering through the front of the building. I think that's really important to keep the integrity of the historic feel, because that is where you're going to drop people off. That is still going to be the front face, even if it's not how you enter. I would prefer the central entrance for that reason, with lower landscaping, so that those columns are really showcased. I appreciate the investigation into a viewing area higher up, but again, of course, the sides are more important, and we do have to think about costs. But the gathering space as it is in design one is not central. In fact, the cafe is, which is bizarre, because then you're going to have people outside lining up to get drinks, blocking kind of a lot of things. And the changing rooms, you know, so if we could split them up a bit, I think it would work better for the public if we're going to go with the side. I hope, you know, again, it's not my preference. I would like to see us blend these more and see what we can do with them. But I did want to just bring up, especially those historic columns, they really should stay centered on the building. Otherwise, it's gonna feel out of place. Thank you.
All right, Water.
Good evening. Just 2 points that I want to make. Thank you for the design. I do like the option 2, where it's central, because it gives you a feeling there's a drop off and then you just come in at the center. And if that design can incorporate it all, the option, also making a ticket windows facing outside. If somebody wants to purchase the tickets, they can do it either outside or inside, have the option available. And another point regarding storage, there's a Zamboni, would it be feasible to expand it on the left side of the building so that they can add the storage instead of pushing it toward the Rink? Because I believe there might be some space if it's expanded to the left, expanded to the left side. Those are the two options, point that I want to make, but I like the center. Thank you.
One other add-on question I have to what Wadner just said, from the slide that we're looking at right now, is there any room for expansion upward to the site, and could that create some of the additional storage space? If maybe Glenn has an answer to that, or Marianne.
When you mean upward, do you mean kind of to the north on this plan? What do you mean?
Right, to the north on this plan.
Marianne, do you want to take that, or I can talk about it?
Why don't you take that? And before you start, I think the idea, Wadner's idea of it taking the Zamboni shed and moving it left so we can get more storage was actually a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, Glenn, talk about that space between the ice sheet and the building.
Yeah, so as we're going to talk about next time, we're going to talk about the size of the rink, which you all know is 196 feet. And we're thinking that as it is right now, the space between the warming hut and the skating rink is pretty tight. A lot of you have talked about how congested it feels and how tight it feels right now between the building and the rink. And we'll be talking next time about the final size of the rink. It might get a little bit bigger, it might not. But at the north end, at the page north here, really, of the rink, you're hard up against the historic walls and the historic masonry. There's really no movement for pushing that any further north. So any expansion of the building to the north, if we were to keep this as it is now, we're going to tighten that space between the rink and the building. And I think that's going to be really tough.
All right, thank you.
That's my preliminary answer. I know there's a lot of moving pieces in that answer, but that's the main concern.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, I was going to say that rather than put the circulation up to an upper level inside the building, put it outside the building. You could have a porch on the north side of the building, and you could get up to the porch with a stair that's outside the building. And then you could have a gallery up at that second level, keep it outside the building. And I don't think that would, be of any concern, because it would simply give cover or more or some cover on the north side of the building. I don't think it would reach the rink completely, maybe halfway to the rink. The porch width would be. Anyway, that's an idea that you could explore to get higher and keep the original shape of the building. And then I mentioned before, if you want to go with the scheme number one, maybe you could put scheme number one back up, the plan for it back up. Yeah, so you see the office there, and the loggia that goes around it. Well, you could have an element, again, sorry about this, an element that's like a tower that incorporates, like a 10 by 10 space that either part of the building or an addition to the building, which would allow you to get up to that porch, that upper level in the front of the building, if you wanted to do that. But the point is that could be a knuckle right there that the office could be part of, and so it could function as a two-way street, coming in at the bottom, going up to the top. There could be a stair in the other side, in the left-hand side of the loggia to get up to the top. And you might be able to integrate that into a viewing level. Just pointing out, I think there's a whole bunch of ideas that could be used here and put together, mix and match. I'm sure that the architects can come up with a good look at that, maybe.
All right,
Thank you.
Mary?
Yes, I just want to ask, when does the budget figure into this process? Like, we can create a number of mix and match. We can create a number of preferred versions. We seem to have differences of opinion perhaps on the two drawings we've seen. But when does the budget come in? And how do we figure out the budget in which we're facing, as a town meeting member, I'm very aware of our budget and the votes we have taken to, override our current financial plans. So I want to really begin to understand the budgetary implications. And then also, I'm really concerned about trying something, wildly new for the convenience of a view. Like, you can go to the top of the hill and look at Boston. You can look all around at the top of the hill. The views are, having been to Lars Anderson since 1988, are really there at the top of the hill. And that we were convinced that somehow views are so important. I think the historic landscape and the context for this design is the most important thing.
All right, so for Mary's question about budget, maybe this is for Millie and or Tim.
Yeah, I can take that. Miri Pradhan, Director of Parks and Open Space. So the idea is that once the design team has direction of which concept to develop further, you saw that Jeff had presented earlier towards the end of the, towards the later design review meetings, maybe design review 4 or 5. The team would do a cost estimate, and that's when we would get a sense of idea of what the total budget cost for the project would be. And then with that, again, Mary, the idea is that once we have the idea, then the town staff could think about planning for the next steps for the construction implementation.
But don't we have a bit of an obligation to keep this within the scope, not just of, the skating and the historic landscape, but of keeping something affordable,
Yeah,
not outrageously fantastical, or at least having guiding principles as we make comments about what's possible. I just thank the designers so much for taking this far. It's great, but I'm concerned about that aspect.
Right, absolutely. We should definitely keep that in mind and make sure that it is, as you mentioned, fits within the context of the place and gives what we need, but also importantly fits within the budget. It needs to check all the boxes for us.
If I recall correctly, very loosely, we were thinking around 7 million, up to 7 million. Is that right?
That was the very preliminary estimate that came out of the feasibility study, David. And, we since then we've found out that, that 7 million did not really include the restoration of the historic walls and historic elements. So with all of that added, like just our rough estimate is going to be, it's definitely going to be more than 7 million, and could even be 10 plus million. So again, that's something the design team will get into further as the design is developed.
All right, and I appreciate that. It's just to Mary's point, there's a significant difference for if you're designing for a budget that's around 10 million and a budget that's around 30 million. I'm not saying we would ever get to 30, just for purposes of illustration. If the numbers are vastly different, you're going to have obviously a different end product. So knowing even just in rough terms what it is we're aiming for, that would probably be helpful sooner rather than later.
Hey, so David, to sort of address your concerns, and I think everyone's concerned. I've been sort of the person who's taken away the liquor from everybody. I've been acting as the person that says, well, that's nice, but you know, it is kind of expensive. I think that an example is I think they at some point the design team sort of wanted to press the skating rink, which would give it a better view. And obviously, like, no, this is costly. It's not gonna, and I think it's not gonna fly by budget wise. So to get to your point is I've been sort of like the guy who took away, who says it's time to go home. The liquor is stopping right now. And Marianne's laughing at me. She knows I'm pretty bad at that. So, but with that said, I think what we want is we want a project that's going to fit the needs of the town and that's going to serve as many people in the town as possible. And once we have that project, we should price it out. And if we have to start cutting, then we'll eliminate scope, or hopefully to fit most of the needs of the town. Does that alleviate some of your concerns, David?
Yes, somewhat. I still think a rough estimate would be helpful though, because there's a big difference between 10 million and 30 million. Just having a rough idea what we're looking at in terms of scale. But I do appreciate your point that we want to design something that can serve the greatest number of users and then work from there if we have to start removing certain features. All right, Arisa.
Thank you. I just had a quick follow-up that dawned on me that I'd like the design team to consider is that the central plan that perhaps, so right now, the way that it is it has a porch, right? And I was wondering if that porch might be able to remain or be enclosed so that becomes and takes then away the pinch point. If you put tickets in there and you could use that space because we can't expand towards the rink, but you do have that porch space that you could use and enclose to take tickets and welcome people in. It could be a glass enclosure, it could really show off the historic pillars without changing the basic footprint of the building, and it would kind of highlight some of the beauty of that. Even if we didn't, even if we stay with the side view, I still think it's something worth investigating, keeping the feeling there. But it just dawned on me that maybe that was the answer for tickets if we do go that direction without, we get more space without encroaching on anything. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go to Clara, then Jason, and then let's hear from members of the public who've been patiently waiting. Go ahead, Clara.
Hi, I'll be very quick. I want to say I agree totally with what Mary Dewart said about considering about the views elsewhere on the site and also the cost. And even though Lap said you can take things away if they're too expensive, you get a better design if you design to a budget and then don't have to, that it's a cohesive building to the budget. And it always hurts the design to start stripping things away that were important to the design. So I also urge you to design to a budget. Thank you.
I appreciate that point, Clara. Thank you for phrasing it that way. All right, Jason.
Just a quick comment on going back, not to beat a dead horse, but on the issue of symmetry versus balance. My take is that what's interesting about this building is there's two facades. One is the facade that faces outward, the sort of like informal drive that comes up to it. And then there's the facade that faces the former formal garden. And the current building has that colonnade. And I think the thing that's interesting and beautiful about colonnades is they're actually not sort of inherently symmetrical. It's this sort of long facade, and I think it's balanced within the broader area there. So to me, I don't think we have to have a blinder of symmetry on it. There's symmetry and asymmetry in the history of architecture. I think it would also be helpful for the design team just for a further clarification on what is truly historic in this building. I believe the columns are, but I don't believe the building is less than more than 50 years old, which is the sort of informal benchmark for historic architecture. So if someone from the design team, maybe we covered that in the first one, but it would be helpful clarification for me.
All right, would someone from the design team like to answer that question?
The question of what is truly historic in the building?
Yeah.
But I believe it was built, Jeff, you're gonna tell me if I'm wrong. I believe it was built in 84. Is that right?
I think this current iteration of the building, I
It's in
can
the
go back and
1990s. I'm sorry, I was involved. It was in the 1990s.
thank you. It might have been 94.
90s. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's nowhere near 50 years, but I think the columns are very important. And we love the interior trusses, by the way. So even though they're not historic, it'd be great to reuse them. But I don't think there's, it's not a historic building, but it is a historic site and a historic garden. And the columns have been appropriated.
Yeah.
Right. And just as a preservation commissioner, just if we trigger a demolition, if there's an over a certain amount that has to be demolished, then it has to go through the Preservation Commission. And it can be found historic regardless of how old it is. If it's historically significant for various reasons, who the architect is, it's not necessarily an age thing. So again, it has to do with the demolition bylaw. So taking down walls and things like that could trigger it. So if we stay below the threshold, and Rebecca can tell me if I'm not gotten it quite perfect, but that's part of why we're trying to stay as much within the footprint as possible so that we don't trigger those extra steps.
All right, so now let's go to members of the public. Benedicta has been patiently waiting. Go ahead.
I put it up too early. Benedicta Hallowell, town meeting member, Friends of Lars Anderson Park, and neighbor. Couple things I just want to reiterate. I also do like the idea of design to the budget. For the Zamboni, I just want to say, can we please, Marianne, I heard you say what your ice consultant said, but please let the ice consultant talk to the guy who runs the equipment. Because when you pull a tractor into a barn, you need more space than what a designer might think to turn around. And please talk to that guy, because without the right ice, nobody's coming.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine, as a tractor, you have to turn and maneuver into a barn. It's a nightmare. So the other thing is, I also like the idea of amphitheater up in the back, making more use of that lawn. This would be more expensive, but making more of I'm thinking of, Berkeley Amphitheater and all those kind of amphitheaters like Mrs. Anderson used to have down at the bottom of the park. I also want to say, I missed a part when you talked about this, but inside the building presently, when you're in the open space and you've got the glass going out to the back to the parking area, it's not a good view with that glass, and it was boarded up. It's much nicer when it's open and the views are better, and when we've had our skating parties. But you also have to remember, when you're standing in there, you are looking at cars in a parking lot. It's not the prettiest view, so I can't access the design right now. So just think about that. And I also just back to, please be practical. Even though you have designs and wonderful, think about walking through these spaces and the practical experience of it all. Thanks.
All right, Dimitri.
Thank you for your time. I just wanted to make one comment and ask one question. My question would be, within that budgeted amount, we're considering both the architectural features of the building, but perhaps more importantly, the actual ice equipment, right? Is that correct?
Definitely.
Someone,
That's correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so for ice users and ones that use it frequently, that would be and certainly a more important thing to preserve and certainly spend money on. And the second comment kind of runs to the previous commenters' feedback that despite those changing rooms being designated as changing rooms, the public kind of flows throughout the space when you do use it for public events, whether it's school skate nights or public skate or whatever the case may be. So although they're used as changing rooms for put on your equipment, it does create an open flow. And so when you close them off, or if they are closed off, you may interrupt that. So even though you might have more space, you'll actually have less usable space. So I encourage you to consider that and perhaps visit it during the skating hour to understand how the public really uses it. Thank you for your time.
Dimitri, could you please give me your address?
20 Cypress Street.
Thank you.
Janice? Get unmute yourself, Janice.
Yes, just trying to get my hand down too. So Janice Kahn, I live at 63 Craftsland Road. I'm a town meeting member in precinct 15. I'm also on the advisory committee, so every time people talk about the budget, my ears really listen, and I'm very delighted that that's part of the conversation. So thank you all. I also like the idea of blending elements from both of these plans. They each have very, I think, appealing elements, and I think you're doing a wonderful job. So one thing that occurred to me is that one of the things that makes this skating rink so special is the openness, that it's open to the stars. Skating at Lars under the stars is a big deal, and it's beautiful. And so that's why I'm not really enjoying the idea of the loggia, because to me that's blocking the sky. But I do like the idea of connecting the buildings in a visual way. And I was thinking that it could be done with the floor, the pathway itself can connect the buildings visually without sort of having that overhead. So that's one thing. I do like the central columns. I don't know how many columns Mary actually did recover from the town. I know she did yeoman's work. But that's the other thing. In the first option, you have the columns all around. And I think that's also, to me, it's both blocking the views and it also, to me, it's not enhancing the space. But if there are more columns, you could define sort of angles there. So doing it at the corners just to keep that element alive in the entire, holistically, talking about keeping this sense of coherence, and then have sort of lower way to create barriers or boundaries on the pathway itself that are not intrusive and don't block views. I again think you're doing a wonderful job. I like the idea of the viewing on the second floor. However, if it is very costly, that would be, I would not support that. I like the idea of having other viewing sites around the rink. That speaks to me. So again, thank you all. This is really, really wonderful work that you're doing.
I think Janice brings up a very good point regarding that there are some pros to both of the design concepts in terms of these layouts that we see, interior layouts. So do we necessarily need to pick one, or how do we want to go about that if we sort of would like to combine both ideally? What do members of the committee think? Mary.
I think that Dimitri made a really good point about the changing rooms and that they get used for special occasions, particularly for hockey changing and teams changing. But maybe it could be a multi-purpose space with you a limit if you have a wall that could be removed or some kind of section, dividing section that combines the two spaces and opens it up a little bit more. I don't know. That was a good suggestion, I think, from Dimitri.
Arisa?
Yeah, I would support us asking them to come back and blend some of the different elements. Again, I don't disagree with the changing rooms. I mean, the way the layout is right now, you could almost put up temporary walls if there wasn't glass straight out to, the current design right now. You could separate them off in a very similar way to what Mary was saying with a temporary wall that could come down, which would then give you quite a lot of useful space. So, but again, I think that would bring us back to a central entrance. And I understand why people like the walkway, but as much of I like the idea of part of the loggia because it's similar to the oh, now I'm pergola, right on the corner where there were two. So if we make it feel kind of like that, but maybe not so much all the way around, and we bring back that central feature, I just think we may end up with a more usable space all the way around. Like I said, I'm not necessarily against the side entrance, except for the fact that there is no central feeling from the gathering space. And that's really my biggest issue with the side entrance, is that the interior experience of the rink is lost by the changing rooms just being solid walls and the cafe. And so if we go that direction, I'd like to see that. But and I do want to reiterate, I believe that the viewing section next to the Zamboni is going to be open, but perhaps in the summer you were talking about just sailcloths, but it's not going to be covered, correct? That's not something that you were talking about. You were talking about a perimeter. Okay, so I think we're getting to the same point. To answer what David's question is I think I would propose asking you to bring us something that takes these into account as much as possible. One more time, which is, perhaps not the most efficient, because I think, but the way you made it was the idea that we could take from here and there. And I think that that's what we're all saying, is we like a lot of these different elements, and we're really close to a very strong design. You've done a beautiful job, but I think one more iteration, or maybe two more iterations of, variations on the theme would be wonderful. So that's what if I was to make a motion, that's what it would be to ask you to re-envision it one more time, taking those things into account, especially the changing rooms and how much they take away from the view. And if you do from the side, at least give us as much of a central view as possible from indoors.
Tim?
Good evening, everybody. Tim Davis, Director of Recreation for the town. Just in an effort to hopefully provide more streamlined guidance as we move forward, I think what we're hearing, at least on our end, a lot of the feedback is around the roof, about the styles that are preferred on the roof, about the outdoor gathering space and the adding that to the site. And then, as Ariza pointed out, the blended space interior. I think we all agree there's some additional work and blending on the interior and options that are to be given. But I'm wondering if it's advantageous, at least so we can provide direction for the architecture group, if we could take a vote on the preference of the roof, and then potentially a vote on the preference of the outdoor gathering space, so we can solidify that and move forward with those. It's just, again, my opinion as a staffer working on this in between meetings with Millie and Jesse and the crew.
I agree with Tim that I think at a minimum, we are prepared to take a vote on which roof design we prefer. I didn't hear a whole lot of support for the butterfly roof, but we can go ahead and formally vote on that. So I will go ahead. Well, first, are any other members of the public want to be heard before we take our vote? And my intention is to vote only about the roof for this first vote. All right, seeing none. I move that we support moving forward with design option 1, which was the more traditional gabled roof rather than the butterfly roof. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, I heard Clara second first. Okay, Clara, your vote?
Yes. For the
Jason?
gable.
Jason?
Yes.
Arisa?
Yes.
Mark? If you can unmute, Mark, in case you're muted.
Yeah, I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Debbie?
Yes.
Wadner?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Isabel?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. All right, with that, the outdoor space. Do we want more discussion on which type of outdoor space layout we prefer?
Is the question, do we want the trellis or not the trellis? Because the outdoor area is roughly the same. And I would also add that we may want to think again how this relates more broadly to the landscape and to the rink when we're talking about pure outdoor area. So I don't know, Marion, do you need vote on the sort of the outdoor space there tonight, do you think, or?
I don't think so, unless Tim would like to do that.
I think we're all, and please correct me if I'm wrong, at least I think we're all supportive with the addition of adding an outdoor gathering space, correct?
I believe so.
And we can come
I
back
haven't
with
heard any
options for
opposition to
specifics.
that. I think everybody agrees about having an outdoor space. There may be some disagreement about the trellis. I am empathetic to the position that Janice articulated, that a major attraction to having an outdoor rink is not obscuring the sky and being able to look up at the stars and your surroundings. I also understand, though, where the loggia can provide some relief from the elements. Maybe this is something that could be blended as well. What are some thoughts that members of the committee have specific to the loggia and whether to have this extra roof along the pathway? Clara?
I just think you could have an arbor that's where you're going skating, you don't really want to be, it's not going to be pouring rain, so you don't need protection from the rain. I think the arbor could look more like a trellis and actually be more open and give some shading, dappled shade or something. I just think the arbor it's a little heavy to me. It's a little strong. And then that corner between the two buildings, I just think the connection, whether it's an arbor or a decorative fence or something, just needs work, just needs to be refined. But I do think it's nice to connect the two buildings and define the outdoor space.
We could vote on that as a question. Versus
I am in favor of the connection as well, so.
Yes, as am I. I think we all, I don't mean to speak for everybody, but from those who've been participating the most so far, it sounds to me like all of us like the idea of connecting the two, but we're not necessarily married to how it's done in terms of options 1 and 2 as they currently stand. Arisa?
Yeah, I actually don't like option 1, because it's too much. It's just way too much. That's why I was saying, I mean, more of a pergola like what's on the other end would be appropriate, and there could be, you know, a balustrade that would be appropriate to, you know, lead you there. The balustrade that it goes around the rest of it would give you the feel of connectivity without the coverage everywhere. And then, you know, a small pergola, as you know, was just said, would give you some dappled light, which is already, it is just in a corner, right? But then in the summer, should somebody want, there would be the ability to put up a sailcloth or something like that. But the idea that you have to have a full covered walkway all the way through, if it's that inclement of weather, we're not skating. So I think, again, it's an option 2 with nothing is not quite right. It feels a little barren. Although there will be trees, I understand that. And I like the idea of the evergreen trees. I think one of my favorite things about skating there is where they put Christmas lights on it, and it feels just all winterly wonderland. So I don't think they need to be deciduous. But again, when you imagine the walkway with trees in front of it, you're not going to see most of that loggia anyway. So those are my thoughts. Again, I think it needs some work, and it needs to feel a little more in keeping with the spirit of the rest of what we haven't talked about yet.
Isabel?
I agree with what Arisa just said, and also with Janice. I think it's too much building. I also just want to agree with what Arisa just mentioned, which is I'd like to consider the full landscape plan, not just this, before I make a decision on it. So I'm more right now on the side of number 2. And I think we need to see both of these with the plantings to, you know, it does look very barren like this, but that's not including the landscaping. So I would like to hold off on voting whether we go for 1 or 2.
Mary?
I think that we need something that ties the two buildings together, and I can imagine them solving this problem of you know, of a blend of the fact, well, first of all, option 2, the entrance is at the center, so it looks particularly isolated from the left-hand vision. But I think a combination of plantings and historic elements, maybe not in that intense of a way, but the historic elements could be achieved by these architects.
All right, so it sounds like the general consensus that option 1, the loggia, is a bit too heavy, and that most of us appear to be trending closer to option 2, but we would like to see some better connectivity. And you've heard various proposals for how to accomplish that. So I'm not sure we need a formal vote. I think you're hearing sort of the will of the committee is closer to option 2, but with a bit more than what we see in the current design.
Well, option 2 has the central columns that are there now. So what this option 1 is our preferred design. So I don't know. I think that they can solve what we've been trying to articulate. I don't think we need a vote. It's too subtle to vote on it at this point. It just to compare these two, they're quite different in their feeling and welcoming, how they're welcoming people. The intention is to welcome people to this beautiful historic landscape in keeping with it being a hockey rink or a rink.
All right, the other question that we've been wrestling with today, do we want the side entrance, the center entrance? So we'll have a little bit more discussion there, because that's a pretty pivotal decision. Anyone on the committee like to be heard on that question? central versus side?
I'd like to
Clara, go
say
ahead.
something that I heard that visually there'd be nice to have the columns centered and some recognition of a center door on the rink side, but maybe the circulation, the people come through the side, that it seems, because people said when we have the side entrance that a lot of people like, but that central gathering space, the gathering space that's not centered on the side entrance should be centered. So I think it just has to be worked on more by the architects to give it more of a central axis feeling, even if the door is kept to the side. So I think it's too complex at this, or too undefined at this point, that they need to come back to us.
All right, Debbie?
Yeah, I kind of liked what Arisa said about, I agree with Clara about, I'm not so sure about where the entrance is, but where the two changing rooms are, I think that does take up a lot of space to see the rink. So I think I do like better the central entrance because of that. That I feel like from the side, when you're on the side, you don't get as much open space. In addition to thinking about where those changing rooms are, that when it's to the side, you're more looking, you have more space to look. It's more lopsided is what I'm trying to say. I like the central entrance. And I do think that those changing rooms do take up a lot of space. Thanks.
Mark?
Well, I think that well, two questions that were asked were one related to cost, and if you look at the FAR on each scheme, it's very similar. So I don't think that there's a cost difference between either scheme that's significant. I think that when you look at option 2 and you consider the seating arrangement in the center, I think that that's a concern because it sort of blocks off and creates a way in which you would traverse that space that not everybody would want to do. But my main point would be that if you go in the side door, if you go in the side and buy your ticket rather than go in the front, what have we really accomplished? Okay. It's like, you come to somebody's house or which has a very nice entrance and a big open space, and you go around the back door to go in. Does that make any sense? I mean, I would like to go in where you get the biggest bang for your buck, which is basically the central space. So if that means that, you'll like the central space because of the columns, or you'll like the central space for whatever reason, I think it's really a question of getting the biggest bang for your buck there. And I think that the locker rooms ought to be stacked. And I know that if you do that, if you stack them and they're not equal, and one is men's and one is women's, that that could be a problem. This is the equality scheme where everything is the same and equal. So maybe the whole idea of just putting the locker rooms on one side and having a movable screen in the middle would make sense, so that you could, depending upon who's there, you might be able to use both spaces or the whole space together. And as a result, you don't necessarily have to say it's men's or women's, unless a women's team is playing a men's team at some point. So maybe make the locker room much more flexible than it is. And in that way, you could, get more bang for your buck out of the locker room, out of the space that's allocated to the locker room. So that was one idea. And then the other idea is that I think that we talked about having potentially a counter facing the outside from the office where you could buy your ticket outside if you wanted to. And you could still keep an opening around the side. So if you didn't want to walk inside, you didn't have to. You could buy your ticket, go around the side, or buy your ticket or go through the main space. But I think that you really need to do something like that. And then if you want to open up the main space, you could put dormers on either side, or clear stories on either side of the main space. Lift it up a little bit, open it up so you can get more light in there, and that way you don't have to do the whole thing or go to a butterfly roof. But I just think that if we don't get some bang for a buck in terms of redoing this, then you're just taking the same building, regardless of how the program is distributed, and you're just doing it over. Does that make any sense? I don't think so. So I think we need to get more stuff that's more bang for your buck. That's the best way I could describe it.
All right, Andrew?
Yeah, I prefer option one, just for the fact that not everybody who visits the rink needs to immediately go into the shared space. The space is small enough as it is. There's a lot of grandparents that come to watch. There's a lot of people that aren't going to skate, who just sort of come for the ambiance. So I prefer from that angle. I think for the locker room setup, there are some options there. If you've ever been to Warrior Ice Arena, you can Google this. There's some pictures online. Warrior Ice Arena changing rooms. They have 2 locker rooms that are set up similar to ours, separate or side by side. And then in the middle, there's a door that goes up and down. I think that would be probably something to look at, which then would separate the spaces when needed, and then could have them open for when they're not needed. I would assume most of the time they could stay open, except for when there's adult men's league playing late at night, where they want separate locker rooms or separate changing areas. But that could be an option to look at.
All right, Wadner?
Thank you, Wadner Ogier, town meeting member, precinct 15. Also a barter. I live right across from the lodge. I like the center entrance, and also I have 2 points that I want to, 2 suggestions. The first one, the center entrance, if they can have it all glass, and then also have a glass entrance door instead of having a wall. So if you're in there standing, you can actually look to the rink. You don't have to, I see there's the wall in the entrance. There may be some windows, but if it can be on that side from the main entrance, the guarding area, if it could be all glass. Also the seating setup for the center, I feel like it's kind of a way it's designed. I understand the reason why it's designed to drag people to the ticket window, but at the same time, I feel like on a functional aspect, it make it a little bit difficult for people to circulate inside the room, or if they want to use the room for another purpose that not related to skating, just to move the staff to use it as a function hall. So I think that the way the city design, it could be a barrier to that. So if someone can address those 2 points for me. Thank you.
All right, Jason?
I was just going to say, if we're sort of doing this vote style, I'm in favor of option one. I think it's a simpler plan. There's less hallways. So that's my vote.
All right, Arisa, and then Isabel. And then I think what we'll do is maybe not a formal vote, but just a straw poll to get a sense of whether the will of the committee is leaning toward one option or the other with respect to side versus center. Arisa?
David, I think Isabel should go first. She hasn't spoken as much as I.
Go ahead, Isabel.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to make the point that people are not spending so much time at the entrance. It really is about the experience of being inside looking out at the rink. So I do like the central idea for that. And I also want to come back to Arisa's earlier point about the fact that the cafe in option number 1 is right there in that central access. And I think that is problematic. So I prefer the central entrance. I also support this idea of maybe investigating how we might open up the changing rooms with pocket walls or what Andrew was just suggesting. I think there are things to investigate there, and also just support what Wadner was saying, which is the idea of the seating area and how maybe that too could be rethought. But I mean, now we're getting down to like very specific details. So I'm leaning more towards the option 2 with the central element.
All right, Arisa?
Yeah, I echo that. I actually, what I think is that the, oops, the screen went away, but the option 1, the seating space and such, if that was brought to the center, right? And if we entered through the center as it's there, and like I said, perhaps there's glass where the stairs are between there, which gives you an opportunity to have, tickets before you enter all the way. So you don't have to have a pinch point. So you could have option 1's central feel, but actually in the center, right? And then if you put one changing room on either end, as is now with pocket doors or whatever, investigate that. I think that that would really solve the problems, because again, to echo what I think almost everyone has been saying, we want to experience the space as much as possible. I'm never going to skate, but I love being out being in that space and looking out and watching people. And whether they're playing hockey or figure skating or whatever it is, option 2's communal space, it doesn't work. It's too funneling, and it's not flexible enough. But I really like option 1's communal space. But I think I would say the central, but blend the ideas of some of the option 1 into the center option entrance. Thank you.
All right, so what I'm hoping to do is be able to assist the architect team a little bit in terms of what we're emphasizing with just respect to the entrance. I think they've heard us loud and clear about blending the 2 interior spaces. But I'm not sure it really helps them if we're saying continue to design for both, if we might have a clear preference for side versus center for the entrance. So if we can do just a straw poll on that, it's not an official vote, just to get a sense of whether we're heavily leaning to one side or the other on that. So Clara, macro level, do you prefer side or center?
I prefer center, but with a ticket window closer to the end. So you can buy a ticket and go to the rink, or you can walk and go in at the center.
All right.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Jason, side or center? Side. Okay. Arisa.
Center.
Mark.
Center.
Debbie.
Center.
Wadner.
Center.
Robert.
I don't know if you can hear. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay. I'm going to abstain.
Okay. You also, if you'd like to make remarks similar to Clara's in terms of what you would like to see, if you have a blended solution.
Well, the reason I'm abstaining, I'm sorry, I'm getting an echo. I don't know if you are too. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you fine, no echo.
Okay. So what I keep hearing in various different ways is it seems a lot of people like the building and the setup somewhat the way it is, and it needs refinement and tuning, but significant changes I don't think seem to be favored by people. That's why I was abstaining.
Okay. Mary?
Yeah.
I favor the side entrance because I think people feel welcome to this treasured site, this amazing site at the side of the hill. And you're welcomed and opened up, and rather than getting into a crowded space where people are already buying a ticket and changing their skates. There's a release as you walk up from the parking area up to the left, and I like the way they've opened up the space and moved the Zamboni, and I vote for option 1 strongly.
All right. Isabel?
Vote for option number 2 with the center entrance, and I'm going to support what Clara was saying, which is I'd like the 2 ticket windows.
Andrew?
Option 1.
All right. And I like option 2 as well. So by my tally, that's 7 who prefer a central entrance, 3 for a side entrance, and 1 abstention. Again, this was not a formal vote. This was just sort of to try to help the architect team understand where we're coming from at maybe a macro level, but obviously the specifics of the design and the flow remain paramount to all. Tim, is there anything else you wanted us to address in terms of votes, either formally or straw poll?
I think that gives us pretty good direction, especially with the conversation. Marianne, I'm going to defer to you if there's something that you are teetering on that you'd like some clarity on as we move forward.
No, I think this has been really helpful. So I'm ready to start sketching again.
All right. Mark, you have a point you'd like to make?
Yeah, my point would be, I'd like to see that center portion raised up and with a clear story of some sort, and not have just a plain Jane building that looks like a Quonset hut. That was point number 1. And point number 2 is I'd like to see you use some queen trusses or something inside the building to open up that whole area so that you could have a larger volume of space in there and not have ceilings down on top of everybody. Maybe you need ceilings at the toilets, but other than that, I'd like to see trusses used.
All right. Members of the public, last chance if you want to jump in briefly. Would anyone like to be heard? All right, seeing none, that brings us to our final agenda item, which is next steps for the following meeting. Millie?
So the next meeting will be, let me see, trying to pull up the date, will be September 16. Again, it will be entirely Zoom meeting, remote meeting at 6 p.m. And then the focus of the meeting next time will be on the ice rink, and then the historic restoration, preservation, for the existing walls and elements of the Italianate garden, and also the landscape design within the rink area.
All right, Arisa?
I just had a question last time when we discussed this. I was confused and I tried to find out a little bit more, but so there seems to, when the bid went out, it said that the rink needs to be an official hockey size thing, which was actually never part of my understanding what the select board said or anything. And I know we're going to try to maximize the space, but the fact that it actually said that, I think I wanted to clarify that I don't believe that anywhere until the bid was put out that was actually voiced by the public. In fact, it was much more about keeping in the historic footprint. So it's not that I'm against it, but since that's where we're going next, before, we have that discussion, I wanted to bring up that, this is a historic rink that people play hockey on. And yes, we have 350 hockey players in Brookline, but we also had over 1,800 Brookline residents sign a petition asking for the rink to be kept as historically accurate as possible. So I want to make sure that as the rink design goes forward, that we keep that in mind as well. And I don't know if we need to do something to change the language since that's what was put out, but I would like to voice that concern before the meeting, as opposed to it coming up in an unfortunate or contentious way.
Mary?
Yes, I've actually done some research on the existing rink, and Mary Ann Thompson's group has stated that the rink is 197 feet, 6 inches long, 85 feet, 3 inches wide, and plus or minus 20 radius. And the USA Hockey states that for regional playoffs and national championships, the ice surface dimensions shall be no less than 185 feet long by 85 feet wide. That's just the beginning of the research I've done. And so I think we really have to understand the historic context, but what actually USA Hockey says about dimensions, and understand the existing rink and how it's served us pretty well as it is. And to reiterate what Arisa said about our petition, we had, thousands of people just from Brookline, liking the rink as it is.
Debbie?
I just had a question about the process from now until the next meeting. So I was wondering, so Mary Ann's group will come up with the next designs, and then I thought it was mentioned that Tim and Millie, so who meets in between this meeting and the next meeting? And what is the process in between there? Does she come up with another design and you guys look at it? Or what happens in between these two meetings? Who's involved?
Thanks, Deb.
Millie,
I'll take
Or
that.
Tim?
Millie, you can jump in if you'd like. So after this meeting, Marion Thompson and her team, along with Millie, myself, Jesse Wasner, and Rebecca Morosky from the town, meet with the design firm to help navigate the feedback that we've heard here, to make sure that everything that has been spoken about is taken into account and their designs are reflectant of that. So we meet with them weekly or bi-weekly in between meetings, just to help create that, navigate that, but also help put together the presentation for the next DRC, so that everybody's on the same page on the town side, just as much as the DRC side.
Thank you.
I just would like to say we need to talk to Brookline High to see, we're not designing a rink for the National Hockey League. It would be good to know what the high school team would like to have, so they don't have to rent ice elsewhere if possible. And I love hearing about this great petition, but I think it should be made public and who these people are, because I tried to look online at the petition, but they won't release anybody's names. And we are designing this rink for Brookline. So I hope we're solving for everyone in Brookline. Thank you.
All right, any final words from anyone before we conclude for the night?
I'd just like to say briefly, I can't get my video here, and I know everybody's being denied the opportunity to see me. I just can't figure it out.
Arisa?
Good thing we know what you look like, Bob. Image of you skating. I just wanted to say that I do believe that the names of those petitioners were sent to the select board and broken down by zip code. So what the email that I got is that Brookline zip codes equaled 1,841 verified signatures from residents and 1,846 signatures from Bostonians, and the remaining, whatever that means, like 4,000 plus, came from mostly Massachusetts and park users. But the names themselves, yes, they are private, but there are some that are public, and you can go and listen to the comments, and They were, I believe, submitted to the select board.
That's
All
great.
right.
I look forward to seeing it, and I think the zip codes are certainly sufficient.
Debbie?
I just wanted to say for the record, I know that Brookline High School girls JV play there and the boys JV play there.
All right, so that concludes our meeting for the evening. Thank you very much, everyone. And again, our next meeting will be 6 p.m. on September 16th. Good night.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
David.
Good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.